I maybe should have put a warning on my title slide with this screenshot from the movie Aliens. But I also feel like this is a very clear cue of the way this presentation is turning to a completely unserious side, following Emily May, who is always so knowledgeable and prepared and maybe unsilly. So we're gonna swing over to the hopefully a little bit silly side, and the side of feeling a lot of wonder about nature. So I'm Ray Powers, also work for the Xerces Society. I'm a conservation specialist, pollinator conservation specialist, and I'm a partner with the NRCS. I am coming to you live from my kitchen in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I work across Nebraska and South Dakota. So a lot of my job is habitat based, putting in habitat with farmers and ranchers and thinking about technical specs for NRCS and how they're administering programs. So all of that is also to say, I'm not a formally trained entomologist. I am a plant ecologist by trade and much of my experience. So this is not going to be a systematic review of parasitoid wasps by any means. It is going to be a scattershot presentation of my learning about parasitoid wasps and my fascination with parasitoid wasps. And I couldn't not put the screenshot from Aliens, the chest burster when we're talking about parasitoid wasps. But I did put next to it this adorable little egg parasitoid emerging from an egg. So if I had to pick, I'd pick the wasp every time. So you've heard from a bunch of Xerces folks. I'm not going to spend long here. But in case anyone tuned in just for this, I doubt it. We're a nonprofit that focuses on invertebrate conservation. We are a member-based organization. We do a whole bunch of different stuff. And thank you to our members and other places where we get funding to continue to do that good work. Okay. So for the next, I think 30 minutes or so is about what we've got. We'll see if it takes that long. Hopefully you're giggling. I've already been giggling a lot when I made that title slide. I was laughing a little bit uncontrollably. You will likely cringe at some of the strategies that these creatures use. Hopefully nobody cries. I don't think any of the hosts are so cute in the photos that you'll cry. We'll just talk super briefly about some of the ecological roles of wasps. So if you're really not on the wasp side yet, maybe that can help sway you that way. We're going to learn a little bit about some of I call it the parasitoid insanity, because it seems like whenever I'm doing a deep dive into this material, I just keep thinking like, I know nothing, and what is life, and what is this planet that we're living on? It's just insane. And while we're doing that, we'll just see some of the fun parasitoid stories that I've come across. And hopefully at the end of all that, you're welcome to join me in the WASP fan club. And I'll give you just a few resources to maybe learn more about wasps from folks who know more about them than I do. So diving right in, what is a wasp? I have to say, they've got some pretty bad PR. You don't have to go far on social media to find some kind of a meme about a wasp and killing it with fire. Um, Whereas our friendly bees, who I also love, really have gotten some good press in the last decade or so, coming out on top. We've got some wonderful horror, like B rated, C rated horror movie covers here, where we really have our wasps painted as the villains. And I would say a lot of this is probably based on people's interactions with social wasps, which, can be pretty scary and can leave a lasting memory. And we will get more into that. Continuing on, what is a wasp? It can actually be something that's a little bit hard to define, but we'll kind of create our own definition for today. So wasps are in the order Hymenoptera, and this includes organisms like sawflies, wasps, bees, and ants. And Hymenoptera are defined by having two pairs of wings that are connected or can be connected by hooks. They have four life stages. They have egg, larva, pupa, and adult. And the females are able to determine the sex of offspring. And females have an ovipositor or an ovipositor that has been modified into a stinger. Okay, there's a lot on this slide, but when we are digging more into what is a wasp, we kind of have to look at the evolution of Hymenoptera. So they are all coming from this herbivorous group of sawflies, which their larvae resemble caterpillars. They feed usually on wood. They spin silk cocoons, and they don't have that typical wasp waste. They usually have a saw-like ovipositor, so they can deposit those eggs into that wood substrate. Um, and they can help with plant decomposition, so those sawfly groups. And you can see how feeding on, like a wood substrate or a decomposing wood substrate, maybe led to somebody munching on another protein source found in the wood, like, a bark beetle or something inside of there. And there are some parasitic wood wasps that have actually started to prey on some of the other things living within the wood. And that sort of is leading to the group we're going to focus on today, which are the parasitica, the parasitic or parasitoid wasps. And this is a huge group, and we'll focus a little bit more on that. Extremely diverse group of wasps that are feeding protein and meat, mostly, to their young, while the adults are nectar feeders, and just living on nectar in that adult stage. And we won't talk about today sort of this last group of wasps where the ovipositor has become more modified into a stinging organ. And that could be a whole another webinar. And I'll touch a little bit on that distinction in the end. So huge group. And I will say that all bees are coming from these wasp ancestors, and so I like to think of bees as sort of vegetarian wasps and ants as wingless wasps. Okay, so like I said, these is an incredibly diverse order, and when we're talking about the described number of species of wasps worldwide, it's somewhere around 123,000 species of wasps. And the vast majority of those, around 90,000 species described, are parasitoid wasps. Those wasps that have modified into that stinging organ is around 33,000 of those species. And most of those are solitary, right? So the reason that wasps are getting all this bad PR is really from a very, very small group of wasps who have sociality. And really, they're just trying to protect their babies. A lot of times from mammalian predators, which is, why they've kind of evolved this pretty intense sting, and are pretty defensive of those nest sites. But when we're talking about wasps, especially to the general public, I like to really emphasize that what you think of as a wasp, yellow jacket or a hornet, is really broadly not what a wasp is. They're mostly solitary insects who are going about their day, doing their own thing, that are not going to bother you at all. And they're doing a whole lot of work for us that we maybe don't value as much as we should. Wasps are incredible pollinators. Like I mentioned, the adults are visiting flowers for all of their nutrition. So, they are moving that pollen around in a similar way that bees do. And they can have really unique relationships with plants. I think I was looking this up, and I think there's 164 plant species globally that are only pollinated by wasps. So they require a wasp pollinator, and that's across 6 plant families, so completely dependent on wasps. And a lot of those are orchids. So if you're a fan of orchids, hopefully that's helping sell you on some of these wasps. And a lot of times, those are those really interesting orchids where they're actually mimicking pheromone scents of female wasps and drawing in the male wasp and having a flower that maybe looks like a female wasp and, then depositing the pollen on these wasps and hoping they get tricked again by another orchid flower. So those unique and specialized relationships are really important, but wasps visit a wide diversity of plants and they do a lot of pollination. So there's around 800 plant species that we have documented wasps visiting across 106 plant families. So potential for a lot of pollination happening by our wasps. Especially today when we're talking about parasitoid wasps, that biocontrol or pest control aspect from wasps is really critically important. And when it comes to sort of human-induced biocontrol, where we are, bringing in a species to try to control a pest species, parasitoid wasps are a real star because they do tend to specialize on a host. And so if you have a specific pest species and you want them to hone in on that pest species, if you can find a parasitoid wasp that uses that as a host, that can be a really important value that they can give. But when we are kind of taking that scope out and thinking about those solitary stinging wasps or social stinging wasps, they can be very specific in their prey, but they can also be really generalists and they can go through a lot of insects to try to provision their young. So they can be an incredible source of sort of a broad base of pest control. So when you're thinking about your garden and maybe pest control, it might be worth thinking about leaving, that social wasp nest if it's not in a place that's going to bother you, because they're going to get rid of a lot of things in your garden, a lot of those insects that might be eating your plants. They're also really important for soil health. Many of them are ground nesters, so they're aerating that soil, they're bringing protein down into that soil and air, and moving soil around, which can be really important for soil health. Finally, there's this whole kind of novel avenue of medical uses for wasps and new findings about wasp venom in particular as sort of some types of venom have been really successful at killing cancer cells and not other types of cells. Also, some of the antimicrobial components that they put into their nests or leave on their eggs might have human applications. They can also be an important food source. Wasp larva is an important protein source for some countries globally. So they really are doing a lot for us in the background. So it's worth learning and appreciating all the things that they're doing. Today, we're going to focus on parasitoid wasps, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But I just love this slide that shows some of the diversity in shape and size, and the upper left adorable wasp. Like, could it get any cuter? Just a little blurb. That is an egg parasitoid, and we'll talk a little bit more about egg parasitoids, but you see the balls on the end of the antenna, and it actually uses those to tap the eggs and assess the quality of the eggs on which it lays its eggs, which is, yeah, wild. So just an incredible amount of diversity and kind of fabulousness in some of these wasps. Okay, so defining parasitoid. This one has been something I have to keep coming back to the more and more I learn about wasps. And they kind of have aspects of parasites and predators. The parasitoids do. So a parasite, we usually think of it's feeding off the host. It's not killing it. This is, ticks and fleas. So they might be having some impact on health or spreading disease, but they're not typically killing the host. And then if you go on the other side of the spectrum where we have predators, they're usually taking many prey to develop and grow. So not just a single prey, they usually are kind of killing and consuming in pretty fast order. Parasitoids are kind of somewhere in between. One of the really defining things is that they only require one host for the development. It can be less than one host, as we'll see. Um, and it does end up in the death of the host, although it's often a slow and, I can only imagine, painful process. Okay, so what that life cycle can look like. We've got up at the top, excuse me, an adult female wasp. And again, I've got that photo of her on the flower, just to emphasize that she's visiting flowers for all of her nutrition. And then she is finding her host, which in this example is a caterpillar, and she's ovipositing an egg into or on that host. And that egg is hatching, the larva is emerging, and it is slowly feeding on that host caterpillar. And they are pretty specialized in the way that they feed. They're taking sort of non-essential systems and hemolymph first, so that that host insect is able to stay mobile and alive. It's not advantageous for this wasp if that caterpillar is, got a larva inside of it, but is immobile and can't fend off other predators, right? If that caterpillar gets eaten by a bird, that wasp is not having reproductive success. So maintaining that sort of mobility in the host for as long as they can be a critical component of the parasitoid life cycle. At some point, this differs. The larva or the pupa or the adults will emerge from that host, but they will pupate, and then an adult wasp will emerge from the pupa to start that cycle over again. So, a little gory, but pretty fascinating when you think about all the components of this. Some of the distinctions, I'm gonna go into some of the distinctions between these. So like I said, that adult wasp is laying her egg in or on. So the in are our endoparasitoids. And that can lead to really fun headlines for science articles like this, where they're using the saw-like spines to break out of the host body. So again, sort of, to me, this is a throwback to that alien image from the very beginning. But this is actually a pretty complicated life strategy in a lot of ways. They're when they are inserting that egg, they might also be inserting a number of other things. There are symbiotic viruses within the DNA of the wasp that they can insert into that host, um, and that can help suppress the host immune system. So that keeps the host's organs and immune response from attacking that egg or that larva. It can also insert different chemicals that can impact the development of that host, making it longer or shorter development times and growth times. It can also impact the nutritional quality of those host materials that the insect is, or that the host is providing to the larva. So the research on endoparasitoids is really fascinating, and it seems like there's always a new story about our endoparasitoids. When we're just setting that egg on, some of these hosts, what you'll see here is actually a caterpillar body. It's really zoomed in, and I might have lost some text here. But that egg will hatch and the larva will, insert its mouthpiece into the host. And essentially the same process will happen, but all of that development is happening outside of the host. And this happens on a wide variety of different hosts, like Lepidoptera here, where we've got caterpillars, spiders, beetles, all kinds of insects. And there are some similarities where the wasp mom might be inserting venoms to suppress that immune response to that site where it's attaching. They also can have secretions in their saliva that do similar things as the venom might do, where it's, keeping the hemolymph from clotting, it's preventing an immune response. It can also impact behavior in ways that they're not groomed off. And might suppress grooming and can also impact the growth of that host. And while we're thinking about all the different all the different parasitoid strategies, there's really no time to hide from parasitoids. Their every life stage has documented parasitoids across really almost all invertebrates, all insects. They've got demonstrated wasp parasitoids as well as other invertebrates. So there are egg parasitoids, larva parasitoids, pupa. There are parasitoid wasps that are hosted by adult insects as well as nymphal insects. And this is a really broad host. So I think it gives you an example of the amount of probably undescribed wasp diversity there is. Right now, Coleoptera or the beetles are really our most diverse order, but I think that it is very likely that wasps or flies, but probably wasps, are in truth more diverse. It's been theorized that there's a wasp parasitoid for every beetle species, and for most insect species, at least one wasp parasitoid, likely more than one, and potentially some vertical layers of parasitoids, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So this really is an incredibly diverse group of insects, and there's nowhere to hide if you're an invertebrate. So in getting really passionate about wasps, I'm also just incredibly grateful to live at the scale that I do, and that, yeah, no wasps are coming for me. I really like this photo of the caterpillar because it's really has so many defense structures, all those hairs, which I'm sure, is also for other predators, but parasitoids are still finding a way to get in there and make their babies. And I'm going to focus in on some egg parasitoids because they're really cool here for a couple of slides. All right, so there are a lot of egg parasitoids across many different families of Hymenoptera, but I really like the Mimeridae because their common name is fairy flies, which is adorable. They are not flies; they're little wasps, and they're among some of the smallest known creatures. In fact, both the smallest known insect, which is a male Mimeridae, a wingless male, and also our smallest flying insect, are in the Mimeridae family. About 1,400 species here have been described. And these are incredibly tiny creatures, to the extent that they don't really experience air the way that we do. Moving through air for them is a lot more like swimming. And you can see a lot of them have kind of fringes or hairs on their wing edges to increase that surface area that they can use to sort of swim through the air without adding a lot of weight. They are all parasitizing eggs of other insects, and they can be really important for biocontrol on some species. And this blows my mind. There are species that parasitize aquatic water beetle eggs. So within Mimeridae, there are many species that can move through water, and there's at least one species that can survive for up to 2 weeks underwater, and they are swimming and moving and mating underwater, and locating those eggs underwater and parasitizing them. So this led me down a little bit of a journey when I was preparing for this, where I was investigating aquatic parasitoids. And this is one of those mind-blowing moments of what is this planet that we live on? There's a ton of aquatic parasitoids, which I had no idea about. So at least 150 wasp species from 11 families have aquatic behavior. So some part of their life cycle is happening underwater. Um, this has evolved independently 50 times within Hymenoptera, which is totally wild. Um, and some of them are doing phoretic behavior. So you'll see on this damselfly in the photos that I have on the left, you see this little wasp on the abdomen of the damselfly clinging on. Um, and when that damselfly inserts her abdomen into the water and begins to oviposit on some aquatic vegetation, that wasp will actually quickly move down the abdomen of the damselfly and uses the way that the damselfly's abdomen is sort of breaking that surface tension of the water to kind of get underwater, and also creates sort of this oxygen bubble around her. She moves to the end of that abdomen underwater and is able to parasitize those eggs, the damselfly eggs, as they're being laid. And then she independently is swimming up and out of the water after she's done that. And there are some traits that we see in aquatic parasitoids. A lot of them are kind of hairy or fuzzy so that they can get sort of this oxygen bubble around them. Um, and they often have sort of really gripping um, legs so that they can grab onto something and crawl down into the water. Um, a lot of times they're pretty small. As you can imagine, if you're parasitizing an egg, you're not working on a large scale. Um, so there you go, guys. Wasps in water. I had no idea. Um, and along that same vein, there really is no place to hide from parasitoid wasps. Um, those adult females, are incredibly adept at finding their hosts, using a variety of organs. So they're able to use chemical cues, both direct chemical cues from the host insect or the host invertebrate, as well as plant volatiles. So if a plant is being munched on, it can send out volatiles into the air, and wasps will respond to that. And those can be species specific. So one caterpillar, there might be a different volatile cue than a different caterpillar from that plant, which is wild. They are often attracted to frass or sort of feces of insects and host insects. They can be attracted to associated fungi with some of their hosts, as we'll see. They can use landmarks to find hosts repeatedly. They're able to use thermal cues and humidity cues. They can sense vibrations, as well as using vibrational sounding. So, drumming on a surface and then using the feedback that they get to identify where those hosts are. Um, so it's tough. It's tough out there. Um, and so in addition to that sort of entire creature having all of these ways to find their hosts, they also have incredible sensory. Um, they, they're able to get a bunch of cues from that ovipositor, and that ovipositor is able to respond to cues. So the tip of the ovipositor, which is what they're inserting and what the egg is moving through and down, is amazing. It is able to detect and respond to chemicals, to mechanical, movement. The ovipositors are able to drill into really tough materials. They're actually able to steer towards or away things. They can detect carbon dioxide, and steer towards it. And like I mentioned earlier with the inserting different things, they can insert that venom, that symbiotic virus, hormones that can modify behavior, and also development of those hosts. So really incredible instruments. And one of the early in the evolution of wasps, we have the ichneumonids, which are really fascinating and great examples of just amazing ovipositors. So they are these large wasps with these incredibly long ovipositors. Their hosts are often in wood, sheltered in wood. Um, some of them do parasitize sawflies, which again are those sort of early hymenoptera that are living within the wood. Um, and sometimes the sawflies or horntails will inject larvae into the wood when they inject their eggs to sort of make it easier to digest, and they can use that fungus um, as a cue to find those sawflies and horntails, excuse me. And um, they have sort of this multi-part ovipositor where it's got three sections that are sort of pushing against each other. So they're linked, but they're able to move. And that allows them to drill into that wood and push that ovipositor into the wood. So super fascinating. And you'll never forget if you've seen one with that giant ovipositor, but it's not able to harm you. It's not for you in any way. So I do want to talk about a whole bunch of words. um, it's crazy in there. It really is insane inside the hosts of these parasitoids. So a lot of what we looked at with the life cycle of the parasitoid wasp was right. She lays an egg in the caterpillar, and the egg develops. The larva develops inside the caterpillar and emerges, and there's an adult. So that would be an example of sort of a solitary parasitoid where there's just one egg being laid inside the host and developing inside there. But we also have gregarious parasitoids where a single wasp is laying many eggs into the host, and they're all able to develop on that single host. And so maybe you've seen this in your garden where you've got those tobacco hornworms that have been parasitized by, I think it's a braconid wasp typically. Um, we also have superparasitism and multiparasitism. So superparasitism is when there's just a single host and more than one individual of the same species of parasitoid has parasitized that same host. So they're often able, these wasps are often able to detect when a host has already been parasitized by, one of the same species or a different species of wasp. So this has kind of wavered in the literature of whether this is maladaptive to, lay your egg in a host that already has an egg of the same species. And I think what they're finding is it depends a lot on the quality and density of the hosts in the patch. When those are solitary parasitoids, where they're not gregarious, they need that pretty much that whole host. Really, only one will survive that interaction, and so one of those larvae is not going to make it. So they're going to duke it out inside of this caterpillar. Um, and it can be superparasitism. There we go. Where it might be the same individual coming back and laying another egg in the same host that they had laid earlier. And this again might be due to host limitation and fitness advantages. And yeah, the literature on that is really interesting. We also have multi-parasitism, where you have a single host and more than one species of parasitoid. So this can be competitive, where those larvae are competing, and only one is going to survive. Or there are cases where it's possible that more than one of the parasitoids are going to be able to make it complete their life cycle on that single host. They might be specializing in different organs, or they're just both able to make it. But there is usually sort of a fitness cost associated with multi-parasitism. So this sort of internal warfare that's happening within an individual host is really interesting and has led to some curious strategies, including this strategy called polyembryony. And this is where a single fertilized egg from the parasitoid wasp, it splits into many genetically identical larvae. Um, there can be hundreds, there's even documented thousands of these larvae emerging from a single egg, which is wild. But it gets crazier in that there are castes within all of those larvae. And so differentiation of their morphology and their behavior, where some of them become soldiers, soldier castes. So these are larvae that are essentially just fighting off other parasitoids that might be introduced into the host or were there already. Um, and then you have a reproductive caste where, some of those larvae are actually developing into adults. And this can be a pretty significant number. So it's wild to think about. The soldier caste don't survive to develop into adults. It's only those reproductive individuals. So there really is sort of insane amount of competition and drama happening inside of these host insects. And when we're talking about the levels of parasitoids, we also have hyperparasitoids. So these are parasitoids of parasitoids. And when you start to understand all of the things that are maybe potentially happening inside of these host insects, you can understand why this might have developed. So these are parasitoids that are targeting specifically other parasitoids, and some of them are obligatory, so they can only develop on the parasitoid, and some of them are facultative, in that if a parasitoid is not present, they can actually develop on that original host. So yeah, some really interesting and complicated relationships between hosts and parasitoids and hyperparasitoids. And this happens in a number of different wasp families. And there are even another level of parasitoids on parasitoids of parasitoids that we have documented. And there's the belief, I'm not sure if they've actually found the fourth level of parasitoid, but I know it is believed that there are at least 4 levels of hyperparasitoids in the world. And I'm about done. I'm about ready to wrap it up, but I did want to come back to this definition of parasitoid, just because there's so many more cool stories for wasps, and even among the sort of true parasitoids that we've been talking about, this is just a tiny peek behind the curtain of the stories that we even know about. Um, but as wasps developed that ovipositor into a stinger, um, there's a lot of gray area over whether those stinging and hunting wasps are parasitoids or not parasitoids. So in many instances, these hunting wasps are going out and paralyzing prey and making a nest and bringing the prey back, but they're laying an egg on it, and it is still alive inside of this nest. And it still is only one host required for that development, and it does end in the death of the host. So it's not really clear if they're true parasitoids or not. So some definitions of parasitoid include, they're attacked and oviposited on in situ, so in place, and that there's no sort of modifications to the ovipositor where more venom is, it's become sort of a stinger versus an ovipositor. So we're not going to be talking about the fabulous solitary hunting wasps today, like our wonderful spider wasps, who are dragging these spiders back and creating a burrow. But I did want to just mention them because they're also amazing and beloved. And there is an incredible diversity of these solitary stinging wasps as well. So I encourage you to find more information about them. With that, I'm going to wrap up and say my colleague Jennifer Hopwood and I did do a Xerces webinar on wasps last year, I believe, which you can find online. We also wrote an article in the spring 2025 Wings magazine about wasps that had even more fun facts about wasps, and that is also downloadable online. Um, Really, the match for this flame came from me reading Endless Forms, which is a book by I think Syrian. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Who is a true entomologist. And talking about the wonder of wasps. And she really studies social wasps, but she does talk about the evolution of wasps in this book, and it's really well written. So find it at your library. Heather Holm also has a wonderful book on wasps. I believe that she focuses on the aculeates and beyond, so those stinging wasps and beyond. So some of those solitary hunting wasp stories are there. Um, I encourage you to give that wasp guy, Sloan Tomlinson, a follow if you're on social media. He tells some of these incredible stories. I mean, multiple times a week, he's posting really cool wasp stories, and he also does incredible wasp photography. And I don't know if you can, oh, you, well, barely see this water bottle sticker I have that has a Mimeridae fairy fly, and it says, I believe in fairies. So Sloan has been an incredible source of information for me as well. In that same vein, following kind of natural history museums or places that have insect collections can also uncover some of those stories that they share. So those are all ways, and there are many more to continue learning about wasps, but I encourage you to even just do some Googling because I mean, aquatic wasps, what? That's insane. Um, but with that, I will go ahead and wrap it up. And